Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of an Unexpected Podcast. My name is Tim, and with me, as always, we have Matt, Devin, and Mick. Unfortunately, Rainier couldn't be with us today. On this week's episode, we're going to be speaking about a list from Too Late Manify, and then we're going to move into the duel, and then we're going to be talking about the recent FAQ that came out today. So I'm going to move it over to Devin. Devin, what is this week's list?
All right. So reading this here, so he actually has a little bit of essentially a Moria list, and with an allied Spider Queen thrown in. So he's got Durberts leading a handful of Moria goblins, some with shield, some with spear, and then he's got Moria black shields thrown in. He's actually got one Moria black shield and Moria black shield drummer, which I assume the Moria black shields to support that drummer in case they lose a guy. And then three Moria goblin prowlers. Then he's got a Moria goblin shaman. Once again, three goblins with shield, three with spear. And then he has a Druzzag the Beast Caller, then 3 and 3 for goblins with shield and spear. One Warg Marauder for a little more mobility. 3 goblin prowlers, 2 venomback spiders thrown into the warband. Then Ashrak. Ashrak is leading 4 Moria goblin warriors with shield and 3 with spear. Another Warg Marauder for some mobility, and then 3 goblin prowlers and 1 bat swarm. Then the Spider Queen. So this is an 800-point list with 50 models, and the theme is playing Moria without a Balrog or a dragon, so still being able to do some damage. And I guess he has some memories of Boromir of Gondor and Aragorn Strider killing the list last time with that. So essentially, the big question, actually, I have to verify this before I move forward with my thoughts, is Ashrak able to lead goblins?
Hang on.
And that was something I actually wanted to look up before I made any commentary.
Who's going to be first? Who's going to be first?
Everyone's looking through the books at once. Our viewers probably already have the book open. They're like, you guys are so unprepared.
So I don't see any reason why he can't.
So he's just allowed to lead spiders.
Yeah. Right.
Okay, so then without the clarification saying he cannot, we must assume he can. So,
but it does say that they can only spiders can benefit from steadfast or heroic actions.
Right.
Which is fine, because ultimately you're probably saving your might on Ashrak for a channel, so he's probably not calling any heroic moves. So I would be fine with that. In a list like this with Druzzag and Ashrak, one thing I'll say about it is that you can't really count Druzzag and Ashrak's might towards your total pool of might, because you're really not using it for any other purpose in spells. Generally, the traditional way Druzzag is played is to 1 dice all his spells and only use a might to bring a 2 to a 3 in order to make the spell pass. Maybe channeling if that's something you really want to do, but often that's not done. Ashrak, generally, probably in his case, not to pass the spell, but to channel the ability to make the Spider Queen move through enemy models, which is huge. The fact that you can have a Spider Queen walk through an enemy formation as if it's nothing, and then charge from the rear, especially when your opponent doesn't, like, they've already moved, so they can't respond, call her a combats, do hurls and all kinds of crazy shenanigans, and then get to another leader in the back. I mean, the Spider Queen is extremely deadly with just that one spell combo. So I've actually personally done this in a game, and I absolutely loved it. So I definitely applaud the addition of both of them in here. It does make it where it seems like unless you power up one of these other spiders or bats, you really only have one major threat, and you're honestly relying on the horde in order to keep you intact. As far as the Moria Black Shield, I think 1 is probably fine in order to support the Black Shield drummers. You're just going to have to kind of keep them really safe, but amongst a 50-man horde, you should be okay with that, assuming like Legless or something isn't in play. 2 Warg Marauders for speed, extra speed, and also they can be enraged. They actually have the Warg keyword, so that's another surprisingly big powerhouse. I personally like the way this list is set up. I mean, even threw in a Goblin Shaman in there just for a little bit of fury. I honestly like it. I mean, if I were to try to change it, I think any change I made would take away from the theme of this army. It seems like you didn't want to add more spiders or more bats for that hitting power. It seems like you really wanted them to be utility that you could use when the opportunity was available. With Durberts as your leader, that's not a bad choice. You're just, ultimately going to have to make sure that you kill off any opposing threat that would be like a big leader like Gilgalad or something with the rest of your spiders and such. But guys, what do you guys think of this?
So I've neither played a list like this nor played against a list like this. But it does seem to have multiple threats coming at multiple angles. Its big issue, I guess, is kind of a lack of might. You've got 3 from the Spider Queen, but if I'm remembering correctly, her heroic moves not affect anybody else? Can she only affect spiders?
I can verify that now. But I believe she actually affects everything. She has no
affect everything. All right, so you've got 3 might from her, 3 might from Durbers. Although this is a list kind of, as you said, that doesn't really mind losing priority because you wait for the other guy to commit, then you turn the Spider Queen invisible from behind the lines, have her run through and attack somebody.
Mm-hmm. And to confirm, she can affect everyone.
She can affect everyone, yeah. So I'm not sure that's a huge weakness here, the lack of might. I guess the only real problem this list would face would be a heavy shooting army in the wrong scenario, where somebody had enough shots to take the Spider Queen out, or a siege weapon actually, that could take the Spider Queen out early, or pick off either Druzhag or Ashrak. I think the closest I've come to fighting against this list was a list that didn't have Ashrak but did have Druzhag in it. Didn't have the Spider Queen, but was depending on Druzhag to kind of power up spiders and war marauders, and Druzhag got hit by a dwarf ballista early on in the game and died. And kind of once Druzhag goes down, then the list kind of falls apart. And I think this at least has 2 threats because even if you get Druzhag, you've still got Ashrak to make the Spider Queen invisible, and even if you get Ashrak, you still have Druzhag to make the Spider Queen into an Uber monster. So I think it gives some redundancy to the list.
I generally like most of this list. I'm slightly worried that outside of Spider Queen there is only 1 heroic striker, but Moria Shaman is needed. Druzhag is needed, Ashrak is needed, so there isn't really a way to put more in. If anything, I would potentially replace 1 Warg Marauder for another Buzzworm, or maybe even 1. I think keeping his spiders is a good idea. So yeah, I would only maybe replace the Marauder for Buzzworm just because I like having 2 in the army, just so one of them might just randomly die. Sometimes it's nice to just put 2 models behind your opponent's infantry line. Sometimes it's cool to just have them flying around and just threatening various situations. So yeah, but other than that, I think it's pretty solid.
The only defense I have to a second Warg Marauder, they are easily one of the best objective capturing troops in the game. And I mostly say that because they combine a lot of speed with the fact that once they dismount, they become 4 models. So any mission objective, you can dominate it, or, like recon if you got to get across the board. So that's the only reason I hesitate to throw another Bat Swarm in, but I don't think it would be a bad idea. I think either way, you definitely can make that work. But I definitely get what Mick is saying. I mean, obviously with the Bat Swarm, you have enough threats here where hopefully no one's shooting at it. Generally 4 wounds kind of discourages anyone who bothers shooting at it unless it's a siege weapon or something. But I'm hoping that what it is, you just lay low with him until, the Spider Queen makes contact with something and is not invisible for some reason. That being said, I agree also with Mick about the lack of heroic strike, but it's weird because the combination of Druzhag and Ashrak create a heroic strike. I mean, you power up a spider and then make it invisible.
Yeah, however, you're still looking at a situation where you have to be double casting, and if you had another Bat Swarm, then it can sort of just be a heroic strike on its own with Druzhag's spell, and Ashrak can be doing something else.
An invisible Spider Queen doesn't need a heroic strike.
No. But at the moment, Spider Queen generally is amazing pretty much whatever you do. So my only worry is that I would like to have another swarm, just because, like Druzak can, let's say, cast his spell on the swarm whilst Ashrak is doing something else.
Yeah.
Whilst if you don't really want to be double casting this spells onto the same model in a single turn.
Here's actually where I will actually agree with Mick actually a little bit. I just remembered, when you turn a spider invisible, all it allows it to do is move through things and not be shot at. The actual halving of stats doesn't happen unless you channel a spell, which he's only going to be able to do
Oh,
once.
yeah,
you're
true. Yeah.
Yep. No, that's right.
Yeah.
Now, here's a question. I'm looking at the drummer, so the Black Shield drummer, and it says that as long as one Moria goblin is involved in the fight, they may re-roll a single d6 for the duel.
Mhm.
Does that mean that if you have a goblin and the Spider Queen fighting whoever, does that mean the spider could re-roll its dice? Because it doesn't say specifically it has to be the goblin.
Yeah. Sounds like it, yeah.
So you could just put one goblin in on, let's say, Boromir with the Spider Queen enraged, and she gets an extra. It's interesting, actually. Now that you, and then plus they get the -1 penalty to the courage. And do you guys like the addition of the drum to this?
Yeah, actually,
Yeah.
I mean, I personally like it only because it's relying on the horde to hold fast, and the issue with that is that I think they'll get slaughtered pretty fast. So I think the addition of drum helps quite a bit.
Yeah, I mean, I guess kind of the vulnerability of this list is against a horde list that's slightly better. Like a fight 3 horde. That does, so the Spider Queen takes out, 1 or 2 guys a turn, but the rest kind of slaughters your army.
Like a army of Lake Town horde?
Yeah, like an army of Lake Town horde, or just a horde of orcs.
Yeah, or 100 orcs or something like that.
Yeah, or even regular orcs that just kind of, I mean, so I guess there's 2 ways to counter the Spider Queen. I mean, one is magic, where you just, you keep transfixing the Spider Queen before the spell gets cast on her.
Which 2 bat swarms would help with a lot.
Well, no, because if the Spider Queen is transfixed, right, she's not moving into anybody.
No, what I mean is the bat swarms harass the caster.
Well, maybe, but remember, this doesn't have the might to ensure that the bat swarms are going to go first.
Mm-hmm.
So the caster's, I think, usually going to go first. And the other is if you have enough figures that you can just kind of create a wall of guys around your heroes so that the Spider Queen, even if invisible, can't get at them. Because although the Spider Queen can go through figures, she can't land on figures. So if you place like a ring of figures about 1.5 inches away from your heroes or the guys you don't want to get assassinated by the Spider Queen, they can kind of keep her off, and she ends up fighting those guys in the ring for most of the game.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's why it's vulnerable to it's vulnerable to kind of the fight 3 horde or the fight 4 horde or something like that, like a whole bunch of Arnor.
So if this list came up against like a Harad list, are you scared if you had this list because of all the shooting that they would have coming towards you?
Oh, Harad would hurt this list hard. It would be painful to this list. I mean, because you're not only shooting them to death, like once you reach close combat, you're outfighting them. You have just as many dice, if not more, if a goblin's not involved. You outfight them there. Wound on 5's rerollable, potentially with Betrayer running around,
right,
if he's there.
And also, even if the Spider Queen isn't invisible and she gets into combat, you just shoot into the combat.
Yeah. Corsairs and Harad would really punish this list.
Yeah. 2 questions from me. Moria Goblin Drum or the Moria Black Shield Drum? The Black Shield obviously is has higher defense on the warriors, but it can only be passed to another Black Shield. And there is only 1 spare Black Shield just running around. And also, Moria Goblin Drum has a larger range. What do you think?
So, I mean, I've actually tossed that one around quite a bit. I think in a list like this, it's okay to have the Black Shield drummer. I personally know that generally whenever a fight happens, it tends to stay in that spot. So I personally always go with the regular drummer just so I know I can always get someone on it. But I'm not against him having a Black Shield drummer in this case.
So I think the reason he's gone with the Black Shield drum is the run and drum special rule, so it can move. It can move and drum, which the regular one can't. And I think this is a list that's going to have to move forward because I don't think he has no bows here. He knows he's vulnerable if somebody else has bows, so he's going to have to charge. So this allows the drum to kind of advance with the line as it goes forward. And also, if you need to get it out of trouble, you can move it out of trouble as well and still get the benefit from it.
Mm-hmm. And that's where I meant by once he actually engages in combat, generally the fight will be in that one spot. But I do agree with the second point you made, Matt, that if someone starts to counter it and charge toward it, he can move it and not have to worry about it turning off.
Right.
So if you guys came up against this list in a tournament, would you be, and I know it depends on the player, we always say, but would you be genuinely scared of this list? Or is it kind of something you'd be like, well, you know what, it's good, but I could do a little bit better against it, kind of a thing? And I know it depends on what army you would take, but
yeah, again, it depends on what you're playing. Like sometimes I'd be like, oh shit, this is gonna be miserable. But as we said before, with like Harad, I'd just be like, okay, well, this is gonna be quick. Just gonna go to the pub afterwards.
Yeah. This is a list where it largely depends on what you're up against. This is not like, it is definitely an optimized list with what it is trying to do. So that makes it a strong list, but it definitely has some clear disadvantages, which as every list does. I think if I saw this in the hands of a player who seemed pretty competent with it, I mean, it wouldn't be something that I would, unless I have a hard counter list, it wouldn't be something that I would like laugh at. Like, no, I think that I'd be like, all right, that I see the intent behind this list as very clear strategies here. It's just, I think the reason we kind of tend not to fear it as much is because once you take those strategies out, those really key points, which are not super hard to take out, but once you do take them out, then the list is not really threatening as much, especially if like the Spider Queen dies for some reason, like even due to bad rolling, then it's kind of like, all right, the list now has its bag of tricks that might cause problems, but it's nothing I'm like scared from.
I know, who wouldn't be scared of an invisible giant spider? I'm sorry. It's just creepy.
An invisible... I think, those are little cool.
Well, if you can see it, you can be scared of it.
Yeah, but you can feel it like crawling up your leg.
Like,
yeah.
So I think that's pretty much the list. I mean, I guess we're at a point where we're like, you know what? With what the list is trying to do, this is really the appropriate way to make the list. I think we all think it's a good list. You might want to consider a Warg Marauder in exchange for a Bat Swarm, but otherwise, keep it exactly the same.
Mm-hmm.
All right, thank you to Late Manify for your list. Let us know in the comment section below what you thought of our thoughts, and anybody else who has a list, please let us know what your thoughts of his list as well as any list that you'd like to submit to us as well. We're now going to move over to the FAQ, so we're going to be discussing that now. All right, and now we're going to move into the main topic for today, which is the new FAQs that came out for the August. We're going to really talk about the ones that really kind of stood out to us. So I'm going to start off with the first one that kind of stood out to me, at least, is the ability to take, you can't take Bolg or Azog without having them in the Legion. So you think that was a good thing or a bad thing?
Oh, I think that was a good change. It obviously was an intent of abuse in order to make it where you can, take two different lists and benefit from both bonuses at the same time. I think that was the intent. Now, narratively speaking, does that make any sense? Probably not. They really are about the same characters, I think, in that time. I don't think any journey change happened to them like you see in Thorin, where he changes from one person to the next. So they probably should still have Master of Battle regardless, but from a narrative standpoint. But from a gameplay standpoint, I don't think that was the intention to allow you to, pocket both army bonuses so easily. Now, for those out there who might disagree, though, they are historical alliances. And technically, Azog's Hunters and Azog's Legion is theoretically the same army. So what do you guys think about that, though?
I'll just clarify, because I think Tim said that you cannot take Azog and Bolg at all with hunters, unless you take them with the Legion. It was meant to be about the army bonus.
No. I think, okay, so to clarify, the FAQ should be read, and I don't know if, Tim, you said this, but I'm pretty sure you did, is that if you take Azog and Bolg, and you take them from the Azog Hunters, but you ally with the Legion, but don't take Azog and Bolg from there, does Azog and Bolg still gain the bonus from the Legion? The answer is no. And Tim, is that what you said?
Well, yeah. So I may have misphrased it. I apologize if I did.
Okay.
But basically, it was the new FAQ basically stating that, in the past you could take Bolg or Azog from the Hunters list and still get the benefit from the Legion.
Yeah.
But now you have to take them from the Legion in order to get the benefit of Master of Battle.
Exactly. And so, yeah. And that's where I say, from two different standpoints. Narratively, that rule makes no sense. They're the same army. They are they're the same point in time, roughly, pretty much. Nothing really changed. It's effectively should work, and they're historical allies to even really mirror this. In fact, there could be arguments to be made that these armies could be merged, and it really wouldn't have that much effect. Now, obviously not, because it's two different scenes is what they're representing. But with that in mind, though, from a gameplay perspective, I think it does make a lot of sense. Because it creates an abuse tactic. But that's where I was coming at. So do I agree with the change? I do, but I'm thinking of it strictly from gameplay. But I mean, what do you guys think? Do you even disagree with my assessment of it?
I'm not sure, frankly, it makes. So this is one of those changes that I think you're correct about why they made it, but I don't think that the change actually makes much of a difference. Because what you're going to see is, instead of Azog or Bolg leading a bunch of Hunter Orcs in a list with some Goblin mercenaries, or a unit of Gundabad Orcs allied in, what you're going to see is Azog or Bolg leading a bunch of Gundabad Orcs or Berserkers or something in a list, with a bunch of other heroes from the Azog's Hunters list allied in. And I'm not sure, as a practical matter, much changes because of this.
Yeah.
So, probably I think my preference would have been to leave it alone. But, I'm not heartbroken by this, because, I think you just kind of slightly change how you design your lists and you get the same effect.
And that's pretty true, actually. This probably has zero effect once you start mixing and matching the list slightly differently.
Right.
So.
I think the effect it does is that you can't just take a bunch of mercenaries with a mercenary captain to get the bonus. Now you have to take Azog with something else and then get the mercenaries in case you still want them. But it's very minor change.
Yeah, I mean, basically you're just subbing out Gundabad Orcs for Hunter Orcs or whatever to do it.
Yeah.
So.
And the thing is, honestly, if you think about Duel Guldur, you can still get. I think Bolg and Azog, are they in Duel Guldur? No, they're not in Duel Guldur, actually. So you can't do it from there.
They are historical allies.
They're historical allies, so you just ally them.
Yeah. So it's not changing very much. I mean, so obviously not the impactful one. But I guess for me, I'll go next here with one that I think a lot of people have been talking about all over the place is, and that actually had a huge impact for me, is the demolition bomb. And so this is one where now the demolition bomb. So first off, the demolition bomb probably had like 4 FAQs regarding it, I think. But one of the big ones that really had an impact was the now you need 2 enemy models within range of the bomb in order to detonate it. So the thing that comes across to me immediately is the 2 enemy models bit. There is clearly an intention there. Now, if we look at Jay's article he posted on the Warhammer World, not Facebook page, but the Warhammer World page, he made an article where the intention was to prevent suiciding. Now, for those who don't know, because new players might be confused, why would you want to prevent suiciding? There was a player named Jasmine Tetley, whom in the GBHL, and I'm sure other players may have figured this out as well, but she was the first to really make it publicly known because she won the Warhammer World GT with these demolition teams as one of her armies. And one thing she would do to win the game is to blow her own army up after she accomplished the objectives. That would satisfy the 25% ending condition of a mission and thus end the game, and the opponent could literally do nothing about it. So it's actually a very creative way to win the game. I've seen people do the same thing with chariots running over their own armies, or like mummies. You can do the same thing in a variety of different fashions to kill yourself. Popping ring wraiths was a popular one back in the old days of fell beasts being everywhere. So this is nothing new, but now it's a new way of doing it with the bomb. Okay, I get stopping it. I think where a lot of people kind of are confused is the fact that it's 2 models are required rather than 1. And I can only think of one reason behind this, because it's a very clunky way of doing it. Very clearly they thought about this, right? Like, why list 2? Very clearly this was thought about or in some way. And so what my assumption is, and the only way I can think of it is, if, let's say, Jasmine was playing against me and she was trying to detonate the bomb, but couldn't because of that requirement, now I can't move a single model near that bomb at all. Otherwise, she could just detonate it. Because for those of you who don't know, the bomb activates before her combat's even happened. So really all that's happening is I've shifted the narrative from now she just blows her own army up when she wants to she blows up her own army whenever I move one model around it. And so I think what they wanted to do was allow the player to have a little bit of counterplay, where you could send a hero into there and start slaughtering through the troops and trying to disable the bomb, but they wouldn't blow it up. Now, this narratively makes no sense, which is why I do find that if that's the intent, that's a very clumsy way of handling it, in my opinion, personally. Because it just is like, oh, where Aragorn's coming, like, should we detonate? No, there's not enough troops. Like, I don't know. It's a very clumsy, I guess. It doesn't feel natural in the game.
All right, let me stop there and let me push back on you.
Go ahead. Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
The original intent of the demolition charge was to blow up a wall. It was not designed as an assassination tool for Aragorn. Okay. And I mean, we've turned it into an assassination tool for Aragorn. So I'm not sure we could realistically push back and say it is not narratively correct that they're going to save this to kill 2 guys rather than 1, because the response to that is, well, if we were going to be narratively correct about it, they'd save it to blow up a wall rather than any number of guys. So,
and that's true. Actually, that's a very good argument. No, I actually agree with that 100%. You're right. So from a narrative perspective, actually, it wouldn't make any sense to use it on a battlefield in the way that we do. So yeah, I actually 100% agree with Matt on that one. I think it's a really good thought there that I didn't think about. So then in that case, realistically, yeah, I think it's a purely gameplay thing, and I understand why they did it. It gives you counterplay against the bomb. Is my assumption, by the way. This is not in Jay's article. This is just the only way I could really think of it. But what do you guys think about that? The rule in general.
Well, yeah, I think it's right. I think it creates the right dynamic where you can kind of send your hero on a deep strike mission to try and kill off the bomb carriers. He's still vulnerable, by the way, because as soon as you kind of send him away from all of his other buddies, then the ballista can then target him, because then the ballista is pretty much automatically on target unless you roll a 1, because there's nobody within 3 inches. So you end up with this dynamic of, do I send somebody within 3 inches of my hero that's trying to kill the bomb people so that the siege engine doesn't kill me? Or do I send, but risk being put in a position where he can get the bomb within range of both of them and kill my hero? I mean, it's kind of an interesting dynamic the way it plays out. I think it ends up kind of working.
I think it's interesting, though, because like you mentioned the ring wraiths, and I don't know about you guys. Did you guys have an issue with the ring wraith thing before, where like people could just basically get the objective and, oh, there goes all my ring wraiths, I win the game? Do you have an issue with that, or was it more like, even though it's annoying, it's part of their ability, so it's kind of, it's annoying that that's the case, but that they have the ability to kill themselves. So
I think
that's definitely different in that the ring wraith army alone, it wasn't as strong unless you had a really good player using it.
And I understand that, but I mean, I understand that the purpose of the bomb was not to just blow yourself up, but I just think it adds that other ability to do. I mean, I get it. It's fine. And nobody's going to make a real big fuss about them making it. I just think it makes it that much better to have the bomb, that fact that you could blow yourself up. But that's just my opinion.
So the difference between the bomb and the ring wraiths was you had the ring wraiths, the only thing you could make disappear was ring wraiths, which meant that it was only useful as a kill switch if you had an all ring wraith army. Mm-hmm. And they've adjusted the victory conditions now so that it's become a lot harder to do that. Like, I mean, in the past, you could just run your ring wraiths run one ring wraith onto one objective and then pop all the other ones, and then you would win 2-0 because you didn't count as broken. Now that I think they've clarified it so that you count as broken once you do that. So that's not a win anymore. That's a way to kind of auto draw at this point. And that's not great. And also, if you do it with somebody other than the Witch King, you could auto lose if he was your general. What made it, I think, a problem with the bomb was you had enough guys that if you sat there and you did the math, you could get on like 2 or 3 objectives with your guys and then blow up, the rest of the army. Still, the other guy would still get the benefits for breaking you, but you would still get, 6 points for being on 3 objectives with one guy. And that kind of creates the kind of auto win situation, which I don't think is really what you want.
So I think, okay.
Oh yeah, there's actually another thing where the whole idea of having to have 2 models within blowing range instead of 1. Like if you had 1 and your army contains Saruman, you can still compel someone within 3 inches of your guys and then still blow up your army. But if you require 2, then there has to be someone who comes, and then there has to be another person who gets compelled.
Yeah.
So unless you have another caster, like another wraith, you can't do that. So that sort of makes sense. Although the bomb generally isn't really used with Saruman, it tends to go in Legendary Legion mostly.
Obviously, this is where the weird clumsiness of it comes into place. It's sort of as if, like, let's say I win a tournament with an Iron Hills, chariot or whatnot somehow, or whatever, and run over all my troops to win the game, and then suddenly the next FAQ has a rule that says, okay, well, you can run over your own troops as long as your own model isn't the first one you run over. Well, then that prevents like tactics like bubble wrapping to stop you from charging me, and I just run through anyway. So it might cause a little bit of issue. I wish the rule came across a little bit more naturally, where an example of a natural rule, by the way, that's not clumsy, is you don't want cavalry charging into a pike block, right? Like universally, that's what we don't want. But there is no rule that gives pikes an advantage against cavalry. There's none. But no one ever does that. Why? Because pike blocks will get 6 dice to the cavalry's 4 on a charge. So it's just a suicidal reason to do so, and so therefore we just don't. That is a very natural, elegant way of creating a solution. So by just defining it as you must have 2 models, that's why I call it clumsy, because it feels sort of unnatural. And it does remove options, like Mick just said, where you can't compel a model into the bomb. Now, is that necessarily a problem? Not necessarily, but it just removed that option unnecessarily, like unintentionally, just because of the way it was written. And I think that would be my only issue with it. Like I said, I think the reason behind the rule makes sense. I think the wording is a little strange. But I do agree with Matt that the reason it's not like these rules aren't needed for other ones is because it's a lot harder to pull off. Though I'd wonder if I could take a Condi's chariot list and start running over my own stuff, would it be FAQ'd?
I'm going to move on to the next one, which was
before we do, one last point, and this is just a quick note, is in the FAQs for the rules, folks should note that there's a whole bunch of new FAQs that talk about how the bomb gets dropped, where it gets placed.
We should talk about it.
Measures damage from. I'm not sure we need to talk about it because they're all pretty straightforward, but people should be aware of them because they answer a bunch of kind of unanswered questions that became really important once everybody started taking the bomb. I mean, they're all pretty straightforward answers about how you measure stuff, where you put it. You can go through and read that stuff, but you should just be aware that it's there so that you no longer have to argue about, where exactly the bomb should be placed when somebody drops it.
Yeah, that's actually a thing that's similar to things like catapults and trolls moving catapults and dropping them into things because essentially it's all objects of some sort. So the bombs, I've had situations in the past where, let's say, two models are carrying it and then they walk over and then the bomb gets dropped somewhere over there, like not actually in base contact with both of them. And I've had a similar situation where somebody took a catapult, they moved it, and then they dropped it on the other side of the troll.
No, see, this is totally wrong. And I actually had an argument with it. So I was against Calman Steele, the Warhammer World GT, had Rob, the head of Middle Earth managing right now, but we were all talking about it. There is no such thing as dropping a heavy object. You can't do it. There's no rule in the game that allows you to drop a heavy object. And that was what my argument was. And I'm glad this FAQ now clarifies that, because I was like, there's nothing in there. You can drop a light object and it is positioned anywhere in the base. But if you look it up, a heavy object is actually not treated the same way. You just simply stop carrying it. So it just ends where it ended. And yeah, I had them trying to do that too, where they were placing it on the other side of the character. And I'm like, what is that? So I'm glad at least the FAQ just stops that discussion, because actually I think it was going to come up more, because Jasmine Tetley in an article about siege weapons did state that, what you mentioned, Mick, as an option in her article. So it's good that kind of got shut down, because it was a little crazy.
Technically it is still an option, because what you can do is you can have your two guys carry the bomb 5 inches or 5.5 inches. Then you say, all right, my one guy is going to go off on his own. He's going to move a 1/2 inch, which becomes a 1/4 inch further to get it exactly where I want it. And then according to this rule, let's see. Well, actually, it doesn't say explicitly. What it says here is the only exception is if one of the bomb carriers is slain, in which case the bomb is dropped touching the remaining bomb carriers close to where the slain bomb carrier was. I guess consistent with that, if only one guy is carrying the bomb at half speed, you would place it touching that remaining bomb carrier. Although it doesn't discuss that explicit situation. So now we've created a different problem with the FAQ. What happens when one guy is carrying a heavy object? Where does he drop it? But that is kind of a annoying way you can kind of work around that rule, is to have two guys carry it most of the way and have one guy carry it like the last 1/4 inch to get it into position and then drop it.
There's actually another issue here, in that you normally move one model at a time. And so in these situations with the bomb or with siege weapons, you are moving multiple models at the same time. So then if, let's say, one of them decides, okay, I'm just gonna keep carrying it by myself and then walk up to the side, can you then move the other model? Because that model will have already moved, and then
that's actually a good point.
And then chosen to stop there, and then you then moving the first model, but then can you move the second model again?
I don't think you can. I think they're done moving.
I don't think you can either, but on the other hand, I also don't think that you care. Because really, I mean, you're using those two guys are dead anyway, whether both of them are carrying the bomb to the position you want it or one of them is. So
well, not necessarily, because one of them could go grab the bomb and then throw it to the other side of himself, and the other one could potentially walk away.
Walk away, yeah.
But then can he walk away?
A, I don't think you could do that for the reason you just said, and B, I don't think nothing in the game is going to what the game is going to turn on is where you can put the bomb, not whether you could get the extra siege engineer away from it before it goes off.
All right, so I'll bring us on to the next FAQ, which is a decently big one. Gambling only being able to give 1 might per turn. You guys pro or against this? Pro? Okay.
This is something that I'm actually shocked that rule lasted that long the way it was. Yeah. What has it been, like 20 years? Well, I mean, I guess less than that because Rohan, 2 towers, but
18 years in that case.
Yeah, probably. Like that is probably one of the most longest surviving broken rules I've seen. Personally.
Thing is, like, there's a number of people I saw online, and there was actually one or two who were arguing on GBHL about the fact that it wasn't actually broken in the first place. It shouldn't have changed. But the thing is that it's one of those things with the banner in that 10 years ago, there was a situation where Outriders were heroes and they were getting free my points. And then that sort of broke the game, and they had to FAQ things. Then again, we're in a situation where in order to allow GW to release cool new models, cool new heroes who might not cost very much, they're going to be in a situation where suddenly those models might just be broken with gambling, kind of the way it happened with like with with Dernhelm, with like the old guy shooting his bow. Like everyone just gets these free my points. So in order to fix the rule, you fix the issue itself rather than think of new models and like fitting everyone around it. So yeah, I think it's a great change finally after almost 2 decades.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, just what Mick said. I mean, literally, just by changing this rule to what it is now, they would have stopped 2 decades of FAQs that have been constantly coming up. So, I mean, this is how that rule always should have been. And I've heard some people be like, well, why is the banner still 50 points and not 6 inches? I mean, I'm not opposed to it being a 6-inch banner, if they wanted to change it to that, but I don't think it's necessary for it to be valuable. I think adding might is far more valuable than, well, I don't want to say far more valuable, but it is definitely comparable to 6 inch of +1 fight value, or 6-inch fearless, which is the other 2 banners in the game that had relevant effects. So I think this honestly was a needed change. I think, hell, now at this point, the only thing I want them to change now is, make Balrog fight 9, and then I'll be happy.
Let me ask this question. Can anybody think of a major tournament that was won by a Rohan army?
So
actually, they're all over the place.
2009, the GT was won in the UK by Rohan army abusing the Royal Banner.
Okay,
And
so
that was with the Outrider list, but
that was 10 years ago. Can anybody
No.
the current version of the rules?
So here's what I would say. Actually, yes, Will Champion, I think, lately won, and I think it was Will Champion. Mick, you may be able to correct me if I'm wrong on this, but there was some GBHL members who won with the Legion Rohan. And I know in Germany, the Legion Rohan, as said by Pascal, is one of the prominent German players. He was, I think it was him, but it was someone on his team who was crushing a lot of players with the Rohan Legion, the new one, the all-hero format. It's actually, Matt, very similar to the one I brought to your tournament. And actually all 6 wins, but I mean, I hardly compare that to the tournaments they were winning at, so I can't say that I'm necessarily as good as them with it, but I do know from them talking about it that Rohan Legion is very powerful. So
yeah, all right, well, okay. I mean, I know it is possible to win games with it. I mean, I've played it a bunch of times, and I understand its strengths, but it has a lot of weaknesses that come with it, and there are a lot of scenarios that you end up in where you're just not going to win with that army. And I mean, okay, so Will Champion has won a tournament with it. I think that probably could be said of a lot of different armies.
Yeah.
I guess I'm not buying the fact that this was broken, because if it was broken, it's a list that a lot of people have, a lot of people play, but it's not a list that you see winning a lot of tournaments. And yes, a good player can take this list and win a tournament with it, sure, but that's true of a host of other lists. And I don't think this was any more broken than a lot of the other really competitive lists that are floating around out there. I mean, with that said, I'm also not in the camp of people who are like, oh, now that you've made this change, I'm never going to play Rohan again. Because, I mean, I have to say, about 9 times out of 10, I was only using this ability to give 1 might point to 1 hero to begin with. Because often your heroes are off doing more things, or they just have it. Or by the time you've kind of blown through all of your might on all of your heroes, you've crushed the enemy anyway. So that didn't factor into it. I mean, it was really, for me, more something you use to, kind of fuel up Dernhelm, which you can still do, because is it Merry or Pippin? I can never remember.
It's Mary, yeah.
Whatever the Hobbit that's riding with Durham, Merry, can still spend the one every turn, or I would use it to give that extra point of might to that one archer guy, or I would use it when I had a hero who had gotten into trouble and needed some extra fuel late in the game, and you generally have one of those. I mean, there are lots of other capabilities in this army that give you access to might, especially if you take the Legion. You can call death and get free heroic actions all across the board. So I don't think it's the end of the world. I mean, I think both sides in this debate are being a little histrionic on it. I don't think it was hugely broken to begin with. It was a big advantage to the army, but there are lots of armies that have advantages of kind of equivalent levels. But I also don't think it's the end of the world for the army now that it's been degraded a bit.
I guess I'll just add one thing, and that this army specifically had an advantage where once the late game started, you were just able to go infinite with might, and no other army can do it. Now, with just one might point per turn per hero, they can't really abuse it in the late game. So let's say, yeah, of course, the army itself might not be the best army in the game, and it wasn't, and it probably won't be anymore. But at the same time, it had an advantage which no other army was really able to gain unless they had Aragorn with them. And in fact, even Aragorn wasn't able to give them so much free might. Now it's basically, oh yeah, well, the banner is kind of like a mini Aragorn, cool. But it's not like an abusive amount of might in the late game.
I think where they started seeing it abused, which is why I think it stood the test of time, is when this Legion came out, and everyone played the Legion kind of counterintuitively from the movies with an all-hero force, and they would just charge up all their heroes and just constantly call might actions. That's what I was doing when I was using the Legion in Matt's tournament. I would just blow through my might. I really didn't care, because I knew as long as I ended up near gambling, I would get it all recharged. And I personally, when I was using my might in that fashion, I personally had it where 2 or 3 characters were recharging every turn, because I'm like, okay, I've wiped it out. I spent all my might. If I needed to kill something, I would just be like, whatever, I don't care. Just spend the might, blow it, because I know I'll be within range of gambling next turn. So that I personally saw it from my perspective, where I did use it in that fashion. But I think in an average Rohan list, you're not going to use it that way. And so I do agree with Matt that it probably wasn't causing problems for the average Rohan list. So it's unfortunate, because it seems like the creation of the Legion, and most specifically the creation of the Legion where it benefits having as many heroes as possible, is probably what brought about this change. And if the Legion hadn't been created in that way, then so it's just a thought, but that that's the only one I've seen win tournaments.
I want to bring up one point, and then I want to ask one more question about this, and then we'll move on to another topic. I really agree with Matt on this, because when you look at one of the most undercosted models in the game, in the King's Champion, everybody agrees that he's really, really undercosted. But that's what kind of makes the army work a lot better, is the fact that you have 2 banners when they don't have spear supports. You have a fight 6 hero with 3 attacks. You have the extra fate if you need it on the king. It's a broken thing in the list, but it makes that list so much more competitive, because if you didn't take it, it makes it much – just because it's overpowered doesn't mean you need to get rid of it. It makes that list much better than where it should have been. And so I'm all on board with that. But the one question I want to ask you guys is gambling still an auto-include in every Rohan list after this?
So chime on your point, Tim. I think you make a great point that some armies do need some broken. Gambling was hardly what we would call necessarily game ending, but I agree with that. Is he an auto include? I think I would still take him in every Rohan list, but probably for reasons that we're not talking about, which is March. Theoden has it, but gambling has it where he doesn't need his might once combat's hit, whereas Theoden does. So I think you still end up taking him. You still end up taking him for the banner. Cavalry and a banner is a great add. I think there's maybe a fantastic argument that the banner in the next edition of the game, whenever that is, I don't know obviously, but should probably maybe increase to 6-inch. I can understand that being an argument now, which would actually benefit Rohan in some ways more because of the base sizes of cavalry. So, but yeah, I don't auto include. I think it has reduced itself from auto include to a very strong contender. I'll say that.
Yeah. I think he remains an auto include in kind of all the situations where you can take him. What I think one of the beneficial side effects of this rules change may be, and something they may actually have been thinking about, is that it may encourage people to start thinking about some of the other Legendary Legion lists that don't have him, like Theodred's Guard and I can't remember what it's the Aemir list, the one
Aemir's Riders, yeah.
Aemir's Riders, and making people kind of look at those lists again as potential alternatives, and maybe give a little more variety to how Rohan's going to work. And I think if people start doing that and we start seeing some of those lists, then that's a benefit of this change.
Did you guys have any other talking points? I have one more for the FAQ. Would you guys have anything you wanted to talk about?
Just to throw it out there, because I'm actually the Warhammer World GT that just happened, which is of course the most recent tournament due to this whole pandemic. I think of the top 4 armies, 4 players, I think 3 of them had Rohan lists. I'm pretty sure, because Jay had Defenders of Helm's Deep, and then Damien O'Byrne had Ride Out and Meet Them, which is not really a Legion; it's his own concoction, but just funny. No, I don't know if that influenced it. I don't know, but I'm just saying. Jasmine Tetley.
Yes. So okay.
Jay came in second, though. So.
Did anybody have anything specific on the FAQ they wanted to talk about?
I think most of the other changes are pretty obvious.
I want to bring up one if nobody has anything.
Yeah, I don't have any others that I particularly am shocked at.
I have a few. There's, and I'm not shocked by these, but I think these are useful. There's a whole bunch of FAQs in the rules section about how one deals with invisibility that I think are useful.
Yes.
For example, the fact that if you fail your courage test to charge somebody that is invisible, you can then move.
Yes, that's huge.
Oh, really?
Yes.
I didn't miss that.
Yep.
So that means if you've got, if you're trying to charge somebody with the ring and you fail your courage test to charge them, you can then still move up and end a millimeter away to trap them, which is a big change.
Huh.
I always wondered with the ring rules, how come people who are most courageous have the best eyesight?
Yeah.
They eat their carrots.
I mean, to a certain extent, it's like counterintuitive, right? Because that's supposed to be the measure of like how intelligent you are, I guess, about how well you can figure out that somebody's moving around.
I agree. Gundabad Berserkers are super smart.
Yeah. Not only that, but I would think that the most intelligent people would be, I'm going to be nowhere near this invisible giant spider. Are you want me to charge this? That's nuts. So that's an interesting rule change. One other thing in here is
actually, just to clarify on that one thought I had, that makes it where you can just infinitely try to charge that invisible model, because if you fail, there's no consequence and you just go somewhere else.
Yep.
So it's like invisible models are now like guaranteed to be charged because no one tried before because of the how hard it was to fail. Now there's zero risk.
Yeah, your ability to kind of send kind of Gollum behind the lines is kind of reduced here.
Oh my gosh! Yeah, that's insane.
Do you think that's for the better or the worse?
I think that's for the better. I definitely think that is for the better. The other problem it creates, by the way, is now it creates a problem for that invisible spider we were talking about earlier in the episode, and that's because the invisible spider goes behind the line. I mean, if the invisible spider moves second, it doesn't change the dynamic. the invisible spider moves first, it changes the dynamic because the invisible spider can now go behind the line and hit the, get behind the leader to get the trap and then kill him. And then, you can take 5 or 6 tries with everybody that's in the second line to try and go in and hit the invisible spider and have the invisible spider hit random guy who charged in rather than the hero.
Yeah, it's like zero consequence to them now. They're like,
Yeah.
why not? Why not give it a shot?
So I think that's actually a pretty significant nerf to invisibility. One other nerf to invisibility that kind of snuck in here in the rules is, do Sauron, the Necromancer, and Ringwraith models ignore the invisible rule for models made invisible with the Shroud of Shadows magical power in the same way as the One Ring? The answer is yes.
Yeah, that's huge.
So yeah, your Ringwraiths are now no longer quite as afraid of that invisible spider because they can always.
And narratively, that makes total sense. The Shroud of Shadows is arguably throwing them in the shadow world like the Ring does, and they can see in it. So, in fact, they live in it. So, I think that's a good change.
There's actually another FAQ bit which I found interesting and a very good change. In the main rules manual, are objective markers or any other kind of marker, such as a cave drake's nest marker, counted as impossible terrain, difficult terrain, or open terrain? And says here, markers are treated as open terrain, and models may finish their movement on top of them if they wish. So this is actually one where virtually in every single game where you're setting up markers, someone will go, okay, do we want to use a coin? Do we want to use some sort of base? Or some people will bring, okay, I have this rock, or I have this other marker, I have this little miniature statues and things like that, which very often I found it problematic when people put up some sort of rocks and statues, because then sometimes it sort of was this slightly annoying piece of terrain that you sort of had to go around. You couldn't really block it. You couldn't really control it properly. Yeah. But now at least it's like, well, okay, we have to use a coin or something like that.
That's I don't think you have to use a coin. I think you can.
No, but like, I mean, something. You can always that's the right size. Yeah.
Well, I mean, you can still use that statue if you want. It's just when people get. I mean, you're right. The base size should be the same 1-inch base, and if somebody gets near it and wants to stand on top of it, then you take the statue off and you put the coin down and you move the guy on. It's just sometimes the statues or the little models of Boromir dying or whatever are just kind of more atmospheric than.
I still would think most players are still going to use the objective markers they've created. They just replace it once it becomes relevant to do so.
Yeah.
I think that's more than fair as well. People paint all their cool terrain piece. If they want to use them, then that's great. But then,
I even me as a non-narrative, like I'm clearly more favoring competitive play. I mean, I love the idea of having an army of Lake Town and then going after these pots of gold, chests and stuff. So I get it. Like I would still always allow people to do it. So.
On that note, actually, I was wondering, someone asked this on GBHL yesterday about these counters, and do you then measure 3 inches from the base of the counter or from the center of the marker?
Did it clarify in this FAQ, or is that not clarified?
They didn't clarify it in this FAQ.
Then that's still a question. I always did it from the base, and I think at that point it becomes a TO ruling if it's a question. So, but I mean, because we always measure everything from the base of everything in this game.
That's right.
Yeah.
So I've never seen any effect where we measure from the center of a model. No, sorry, hurl. So hurl is the one thing where we do measure from the center of a model, but that's really more to pick a direction than actually like the measurement.
Well, yeah, I mean, for the actual measurement for figuring out who's contacted, you are measuring from the edge because you're picking up the entire model and you're moving it to a different place.
Yeah, and that's true.
Any point on that model, covers something else, then it's knocked down. I mean, I think the only exception would be if you're using a model to mark something on the board that is not actually an objective. Like, well, what I'm thinking of here is hold ground, where it says, I can't remember the exact wording, but I mean, I think you are measuring from the actual center of the board for hold ground as opposed to whatever arbitrary marker you happen to put there to designate the center of the board. Because I think that marker is just for optics, but maybe I'm misremembering.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was from the center of the board too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's one situation where, like, okay, we're going to put this marker down so we all can see where the center of the board is. but we really got to remember to measure from the center of the whatever we use to mark it.
Oh, no, actually, it says here you score points if you have twice as many models within 6 inches of the objective.
And how does it define the objective?
Probably doesn't. You think you just place an objective marker?
Once the battlefield has been set up, an objective marker is placed in the center of the battlefield.
Yeah, so there's an objective marker. So I guess you measure from the
base.
Corrected.
From the base, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, so basically what they have to do is probably put in the next rule book a section where it defines what is an objective marker, like what exactly the size, all of that.
Well, the rulebook does define it as a 25 millimeter.
Oh, it does. Oh, perfect. Okay.
Or the previous FAQ may have defined this as 25 millimeter base. I'm not 100% sure which one, but there was one. It's just that now they've defined it that you can actually finish on top of it.
Well, now that our FAQs have become a second rule book, I'm not going to look through that to find out.
This is something I want to bring up real quick. So let's say you're in a tournament and somebody brought their own custom objective markers, and let's say they're on the sides of a cavalry model of a base. And they use that, and you use it for measuring. And the guy, let's say he's relatively new, goes, okay, let me measure 6 inches from this base. I'm in range. But then because it's a 25, they replace it, and he goes, oh, well, I'm out of range. Is that kind of not fair because he's measuring from the base of the actual objective that they're using, but it's supposed to be a 25 millimeter base?
I think you should just agree at the beginning of the game.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's definitely one of those situations where you want to do that. Can somebody explain to me, by the way, why there are 2 separate sections for each rule book, one for errata and one for designer's commentary?
The errata is the actual rule change within the rule book, and the designer's commentary is supposed to be an answer to a question.
Okay. I have to say that
it's confusing.
Probably about half of the designer's commentaries are actually rules changes to the original rule book.
Yeah.
I know that you don't want to admit that, but they
are. Actually, I noticed that as well, that a lot of the because I mean here, I've run into the same problem. I often am flipping between them trying to figure out where, but
can you at least put them all in one place, please, Games Workshop? There's no reason to make it twice as hard to find the stuff.
Yeah, I remember at some point being a referee and having a question about a MUMAC and being like, I know I've seen this in this FAQ. I can't find it.
Where the heck is
it? And then it turns out it's actually in the errata and not in the FAQ.
And that's actually really affected me as well. Like, I mean, especially when these things get so big, you have a match that's like a timed game, and literally players have used judges looking up rules to burn time, and it's just like, you know, so you're trying to find this thing as fast as possible, and you're like, is it the errata FAQ, or where is this rule? And and you know you've seen it. That definitely frustrates me too. So.
Yeah. I mean, especially since you have you have you have changes like the ones about that we just discussed about, kind of where you're going to place the bomb. They're kind of hidden amongst. This is the example that really jumped out at me. Question: can models finish their move on top of a Moria goblin drum? Answer: no, but they may attempt to jump over it. That's really, how frequently was that question asked? How many times has that come up? But we need to kind of wade through all of these to get to the ones that we, are actually going to.
I guess it's come up a lot. I don't even know how. So my thing about the FAQs I actually find interesting is theoretically all of these will be merged into the next edition of the game. Like, that is my theory. That's not something any Middle-earth team member has mentioned. I just am assuming. But if you have to clarify every little thing such as that, how do you, if you have to jump over a goblin drum, what about Galadriel's mirror? Can I jump over that? Does that mean no because it wasn't specified in this line of text?
In fact, can you jump over the demolition team's bomb?
Yeah, it wasn't specified, and clearly. And clearly, if they wanted to specify it, they would have in this FAQ here. So, no.
And here's an even deeper question. Can I jump on the goblin drum?
It's flat, and my model could balance on it. So
Could balance on it, right. And if I have jumped on the drum, can it be played?
with
Your God is
feet,
just
yes.
kicking off all the drummers. He's like, no, you can't drum.
And if I am on the goblin drum, am I in a heightened position such that I get a
A defender bonus?
yeah, so that's that I get the defensive bonus from fighting on top of it.
It's things like this where you need an elegant solution. You define, what I don't know, a light object. All these things are heavy objects. You just say nothing can stand on, move over, whatever heavy objects, and then that's it. And it covers all these items. But
Well, I mean, the alternative is you just say in the rules that that the rules for jumping and fighting from heightened positions are basically like laws of physics, and if the thing fits the qualification for it, then it applies. So you can
I
jump
don't know,
over the
Matt.
drum,
Like, there's
you can
a
jump on the
lot of
drum,
people out there.
fight on top of the drum if you want to. But I mean, the simplicity of that is then you don't need 6,000 special rules for every 6,000 things that look like a mirror or a drum or something like that.
Hold on, because you're a lawyer, so I'm sure there's gonna be like hundreds of people out there being like, "Well, I don't really understand physics. I don't believe in physics. I don't really believe in physics."
I gotta agree with Mick here.
Exist, so
You gotta agree with Mick, because anytime you use logic is the reason you come up with FAQs like this.
yeah,
Like, logic is creating these FAQs, and so you need to reduce logic down to an illogical thing. Make a very poignant thing. These are heavy objects. Period. Heavy objects cannot be interacted with in the sense of climb, jump, whatever, blah, blah, blah. Period. Done. And it kills it. So even though it'd be obvious you could jump on a drum, well, the drum's a heavy object. You can't do it. Sorry. That's the end of the story. And, for monsters and stuff that treat them as light objects, just reword it to say monsters for the purposes of carrying keep treated as a light object. And it probably already says that. But other than that, they are heavy objects, and that is the interaction.
Well,
so
now there's this barrel on the table, right? And should we treat that as a heavy object? Can I jump on top of that? It's the same size as the drum.
No, well, I mean, heavy objects barrels would be considered terrain. So it's not a heavy object. You can't carry it.
Why can't you carry a barrel?
What if you're playing in on a Moria board, and there's some drums somewhere, like just scattered across the board, but they're not actually heavy objects, they're terrain. So you can jump onto those, but you can't jump onto the one from Moria Goblins.
You wouldn't define all drums as being heavy terrain or heavy objects. That's not what you would do. Those are terrain, totally different, can't be carried. However, a goblin drum from this drummer team is a heavy object. The Mirror of Galadriel is a heavy object, but the one that she brings into play, but all other ones not brought into play by a character, is not a heavy object. That's terrain, which cannot be carried.
So by the way, what you've just come up with here, Devin, is, and I'm going to descend into legal geekdom a little bit, is an actual historical problem in writing everything from war games rules to legislation, which is there's two different approaches you can take to it. One approach is the one that I advocated, which is that you write these general rules and then you end up having to argue about their specific applications. The other solution is you write an extremely comprehensive rule that deals with all of the specific applications, but then becomes so long and unwieldy that you can't actually find the specific application you're looking for in the resulting rule, which is, I think,
sounds like the FAQ
created, which is what we've created here. So that's the argument that we're having is one that plays out in the actual real world when it comes to things like laws and stuff like that. And we've created the same problem here with this FAQ.
So therefore, you, our viewers out there, should all be happy that you're not Jay Clare, because this is a monumental task. Us chatting on this podcast can barely figure it out.
Let me get you guys' opinion on this real quick, though. What do you guys now? Let's say we take what Devin said. Obviously, there's no official thing about it or anything, but let's say that they made a new edition. What are your thoughts of they asked the community to submit any questions they had? So they had a very, very large majority of the questions people would ask, and there's very few things that they would have to write.
In all honesty, I think they've already done that 2 years ago. I think that Middle Earth Ask question thing, the FAQ question thing they put up, I think that is what that is.
Oh, okay.
If I'm just from like thinking from a business perspective, if I wanted the opinions of a community without resorting to debate on a public forum, then I would do it like that.
Mm.
Did anybody else have anything else?
Yeah, I remember sending like 15 questions to something like that.
Well, they probably ignore yours, Mick.
It's literally
They were all variations on what can I do with the Moria Goblin drum.
I mean, yeah, they were very specific questions.
I'm now going to sit down and draft my 15 questions that this one particular about the Moria Goblin drum. That this one particular FAQ has opened up. In the meantime, you'll definitely see my Balrog fighting on precariously balanced on top of the Goblin drum. Getting a height advantage from this thing.
So before we go into the duel, just one last one that's been burning me up. Can Farmer Tolman Cotton use his pitchfork as a two-handed weapon when he's supporting? No. What the hell, Jay? That's broken the Hobbit list, in my opinion. So that's the only one last.
Only way they could be competitive, and
I think Shire is done.
I know I'm not beating that model now.
So I guess we'll go into the duel from here.
All right, now we're going to move into the duel where I will actually be going up against Devin this week. We were given an 800-point list, and the way the duel works is we take two people on the podcast, and they'll go up against each other in a hypothetical battle where they'll be given a random scenario out of three. The random three scenarios this week were Retrieval, Divide and Conquer, and Lords in Battle. Mick has chosen the one, so in a second we'll get to Mick, and he'll reveal which scenario we have. Matt has chosen the board for this week, and basically we want to kind of create that theme of you're going into a tournament with your list, and you don't know what board you're on, you don't know what scenario you'll have, you don't know what opponent you'll have, so we're kind of creating that tournament feel. So we're going to move into the list first. And I will start off with my list for this week. So it's an 800-point list. And I have kind of gone with something I've always tried to make work, but we'll see how it does. So my leader is Bolg on Warg, and he is leading 10 Gundabad Berserkers. I then have Thimble on Warg with 2 Fell Wargs, 9 Hunter Orcs. Then Yazneg on Warg with Lance, 3 Fell Wargs, and 9 Hunter Orcs. And then the Keeper of the Dungeons with 3 Fell Wargs and 9 Hunter Orcs. So I have 49 models. I break at 26 dead. I have 12 might with Master of Battle.
Wait, how did you get Master of Battle in? Oh, okay.
Because I'm taking Bolg from the Legion.
Yeah.
So based on the new FAQ that we just talked about, so Bolg, you have to have him from the Legion, so I took him from the Legion so I could get the Master Battle with him. The two out of the 3 scenarios are a little bit about mobility, I think, because you kind of have to get to the objective in the middle.
Well, what are the 2 of the 3 scenarios?
Yeah, so one of them is Retrieval, where basically we start in the corners, and we have to get the relic from one board edge to the other, kind of. And you kind of have to have a little bit of speed for that. So I wanted to have some Fell Wargs, and then the Berserkers moving 8 inches as well. Gives them the ability to kind of get up there quickly. And then you have
Lords of Battle and
Divide and Conquer. So Divide and Conquer, you start 12 inches from opposite corners, so they have to kind of meet in the middle to get the objective. So I wanted to split up some Fell Wargs, and the Berserkers are obviously all have to go with Bolg, but you have 2 to 3 Fell Wargs in each thing, so even if I get split up, they can just get there real quickly. And then with Lords of Battle, even though I have a lot of numbers and their defense 4, I have a lot of hitting power with Bolg, and every single model, every single hero has heroic strike, so even if I get fought against another hero, everybody can strike if they need to. And even though Yazneg's a little bit weak, and of course Thimble is, Keeper of the Dungeon's basically a little mini Bolg, but just on foot. So, if I can get some kills with him, that's great. So I'm a little bit worried about Lords of Battle. Hopefully I don't get that. But Devin, what was your list for this week?
All right. So I actually decided to come up with something a little experimental here. And My list, experimental for me. Others have done lists similar to this, but my list is Guaher with 2 eagles, and then I have Radagast on eagle with Sebastian with 1 eagle, and I have Boromir on horse with shield. So
I thought I had the mobility aspect. Dang it.
So I have 5 eagles total, and a total of actually 12 points of might, I think. 6 and then 6 and 6, so 12 points of might. And I do have heroic march if needed with Boromir. And other than that, though, the original list actually was a little bit more bizarre, and I was trying to bring back gambling from our FAQ discussions and have gambling leading Rohan Royal Guard instead of Boromir and another eagle. So that way I get the free heroic marches every turn, but I can't do it because of the hero valor restriction. So essentially, I got Boromir instead, and I mean the idea behind the list is pretty fairly straightforward. I mean, obviously, with him not having any bows, it allows me to just hit on one side and completely crush a side before the other side even really gets to respond. So, I mean, obviously, I've got a lot of hard-hitting stuff. I mean, my lowest fight model outfights everything in his army, or is tied with Bolg, I believe. So, I mean, obviously, the weakness of my list is if I get completely swarmed, it'll be a problem. But hopefully, all the might that I have allows me to circumvent that problem. I only have 6 models, though, so this can be a pretty swingy list if I play it incorrectly. But I do have a little bit of magic, a lot of Crook Strike if he strikes against me. I do have, like I said, Boromir for a little more utility. So that I think pretty much what the list does is fairly obvious. Okay. Oh, and I'm sorry. So this one was a little hard for me. I wasn't sure whether or not I wanted Guahir or Radagast to actually be my leader. In this case, I have chosen to make Radagast my leader, but I would advise for some to actually possibly consider Guahir. Radagast on Eagle, if dismounted, can create an anchor for me. That'll be a problem. Then again, I guess you could maybe run him away. But also with Radagast not being my general, I can actually throw him out as like a kind of grenade and cast his spells with kind of recklessly because I know I don't have to save them on protecting myself. Not really an issue in this game, but that's how I've chosen to do it. So far is that I chose Radagast, mostly more that survivability. But go ahead. So now the board, I guess.
All right, so Matt, you were given the board for this week. Would you be able to share that with us?
Now the board. All right, here's the board. So, just to let you know how it works.
Oh my God. Really?
Really? So obviously this is Amon-Hen. So you notice there's a whole lot of trees on the board. The intent of the board is to have basically all of the bases surrounding the trees are difficult ground. Whereas the spaces in between are open. So there's a lot of kind of small channels throughout a whole bunch, basically a forest that surrounds Amon-Hen. Amon-Hen itself is open and is not difficult ground, except that there are certain areas on there. You can see there are rocky outcrops that you'd have to climb. The water is all shallow, and obviously the beach is open there. And
that river on the side is actually playable.
Yeah,
that's part of this.
That's part of it. And then the two other outcroppings there are both open ground, except they're basically areas that you're going to have to climb to get up, and each one kind of has a path or two that leads up to the top that would be open ground. So there you go. Have fun.
There's barely any places to land with those eagles here.
Yeah, like what is this?
Well, there's a lot of places to land because a lot of those areas of difficult ground are very small with kind of paths in between them. So it's meant to represent kind of heavily forested and lightly forested areas. But there's going to be a lot of places that orcs are going to be able to kind of run in and hide and be safe from the eagles.
Mm-hmm.
I came this close to taking elves too. I almost took elves. All right.
I think Devon will want to win the role of who picks the corner.
Yeah.
So the scenario we have is retrieval.
It's
Retrieval.
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 Okay.
All right,
Capture
so
the flag.
Mick,
it's
can you
basically
tell us a
capture the flag.
rundown?
Yeah. So basically, you deploy you pick a corner, and you put a relic 15 inches away from your corner, and then you deploy you deploy in your half, but not within 3 inches of the line that runs diagonally through the center of the board. So like you make a line like this, you then deploy in your half, and it's basically capture the flag. So you have to capture your opponent's relic, and ideally take it off the board through one of your edges, which combine to create your corner. So you score 1 VP if the opponent's relic has moved, 3 VPs if you are carrying it, and 5 VPs if you have if you retrieve your opponent's relic and manage to move it off the board via either board edge in your deployment zone. You score 7. Oh yes, sorry. So it's actually 1, 3, 5, 7. So it's quite an unusual breakdown of VPs.
Okay.
And then the usual breaking and general points. And the relic is a light object.
Okay.
All right, so okay, so who is going first for deployment?
Well, who is going first? Matt?
Oh, Matt.
Oh, am I rolling the die?
Sure, why not? The suspense, everybody.
Do I have a die?
Oh, okay. Who has a die? Well, who has a die?
Wait, I'm just gonna flip a coin. Oh yeah, we're
Flip
in
a
a COVID
coin.
world. There's no coins. Oh wait, I have a coin. It has the queen. It has the queen's face on it. So Devon, heads or tails?
Heads. Let's do it.
It's a head.
All right. So I'm going to talk about this. So for those of you who have not seen this before, I talk about this as if it's actually a tournament. And one of the things I probably might end up doing a little bit is requesting from my opponent to remove some of the pieces of terrain. Now, in some tournaments, they may not allow this, but generally player agreement overrides judge rulings. So it's kind of a weird thing, but if 2 players generally agree that you can do it like this, and it'll kind of like, okay, then regardless of what the judge says, that's how we're going to go ahead and do it. So I'm going to go ahead and save Tim from that discussion in this case, but generally I will actually do that because the judge won't be kind of overseeing it, and you can kind of really talk about it and see if some of these trees can get removed. Because for those of you who can't see the board, this is a large number of trees even for a very dense map. This is probably the most amount of trees I've ever seen on what we can call a competitive board. So I definitely would have normally wanted to get rid of that. But assuming, let's say, Tim was like, nope, don't agree with you.
Assuming Tim is smart.
Yeah, assuming Tim says, yep, not going to do that. And assuming even if I tried to call a judge over, the judge is like, nope, that's the way the terrain's placed. Okay, I'm stuck with it. How would I deploy in this? So the first thing I would probably do is pick the bottom right corner. And the reason is because the objective has to be, all right, so basically what that means is the diagonal is from the bottom left to the top right, all right? So that's the kind of dividing line of this map. I want Tim's objective to be in very open ground where I can have multiple eagles kind of swarm it if I really need to, and have it where also a lot of decent hurl lanes can be created if he decides to swarm and protect it in that way. Also, it makes it where my objective can only be retrieved in between like 2 trees, which means a large base of an eagle can block a lot of available paths. So also his objective being on that open ground up there about Amen Hen on the top right, or top left, I mean. And by the way, I'm assuming it won't be actually, the objective won't be actually on Amen Hen. I'm assuming the objective will be beneath it. Actually just in front of it.
Just to clarify what this looks like, Amen Hen is actually in the middle of the board.
Yeah, that's what I was just thinking. So
it's in the middle of the board on the left-hand side. So it's actually kind of heavily forested in the area where it's kind of heavily forested in the area where the objective would go down. That the areas where it's lightly forested are actually going to be on the right-hand side of the board near the beach.
Oh, wow. Then maybe my angle is totally off. So you're saying just beneath Almond Hen is not where the kind of stairs are, where that ring wraith is kind of sitting. That's not where the objective would be placed.
No,
No,
so the objective is 15 inches from your own corner.
So you pick one of the 4 corners, Devin, and it's 15 inches out.
Yeah. So I was thinking 15
From the
inches
corner.
out would be just in front. So it's not. Okay. Then maybe my angle is all off because that's how I'm seeing it. Okay. All right. So I can't visualize this
Can you see my pointer here, guys?
Yeah, go ahead.
All right. So say if you picked this corner, your objective would end up being somewhere. It's masked by Almond Hen, but you would see it here. It's kind of going to be right in the middle of that mass of trees. If you pick this corner, the objective would probably be like right around here in this beach area. And we can't see, unfortunately for the photograph, we can't see the corner in the lower right. But if you picked it, if that was your corner, then your objective would be kind of somewhere over here on the beach.
Oh.
And likewise, if you pick the lower left corner, your objective would be somewhere here amongst these trees.
So the objective is actually very, very close to your deployment zone.
Yeah, it's 15 inches from your corner.
15
Your deployment zone is your half of the board.
Right.
And the water, is it deep or shallow, Tim?
Shallow.
I'm thinking shallow.
Shallow.
Okay.
Yeah, I said yeah.
All right. And then in that case, then yeah, I guess the complete reverse. I mean, I guess I would have him where he's basically where his objective is against one of the beaches. Given that it's shallow water, I practically ignore it. Essentially, yeah, I mean, whatever's more open for me, and then also when I'm dealing with his blobs of guys, I kind of want like a lot of hurl lanes, but I don't want it where, so he can't pick up his own objective and run it in the trees, which is good. So, I mean, otherwise, yeah, for some of you who might be thinking out there, well, why not make it where he can't swarm and slam your eagles out in like the dense forest? Like, why not make his objective in the forest? So that way, when I engage, he can barely maneuver around me. The only hesitancy I have about that is literally by the photo. I can't tell if I'm putting myself in a situation where I literally can't land to get the objective. And I'm just looking at the bottom left here and how dense these trees are. I mean, it's very potentially possible that I won't even be able to land. And so that's the reason I'm making that decision. But I mean, Matt, are we saying that there would probably be plenty of space for me to land if like I put his objective on the other side?
So if you put his objective kind of in these woods or in these woods, you could probably land there. But it may well, there's room to land there, but it may well be that the objective is going to end up either like right next to bad terrain or actually in bad terrain where you would have to like land the eagle next to it and then waddle in.
All right, then I guess for the sake of time, let's just go ahead and say what I'm going to do. I'm going to put this on the beach and just assume, okay, it's too dense, can't really land there very easily. I mean, maybe I can block up some spots, but it would be difficult for me to actually retrieve it out. So I'm going to obviously be able to move very quickly toward him. I can move, 15 inches in a single turn, assuming Boromir keeps in line with him, which I can keep him in line for at least 2 turns, so it's plenty. And basically, by the time I get to Tim, he'll probably take a couple things and divide it up and maybe send like some wargs out here and there. And that's fine. I'll probably have to engage and kill his fast units relatively quickly and just go after those. Obviously leave like an eagle back maybe if I need to, or Radagast himself, so that way if he starts hiding in woods I can just compel him out and just throw a combat around and kill his stuff. So anything fast moving I can deal with, but otherwise my goal is to apply pressure pretty quickly and destroy as much as I can as soon as possible, so that way his army tends to break. But the scenario, does it end at 50% or 25%?
It ends at 50% on a roll of a 1 or 2.
Okay, so I don't really mind that. So basically, I would want him to break sooner rather than later. And like I said, hold Radagast kind of as like a backline keeper there, and basically engage as soon as possible. I mean, as far as what's his name, Bolg, I mean, I might cast a spell on him here and there just to kind of break his Master of Battle. But ultimately, I mean, with the amount of hurls I have, one thing that's interesting about this list is that hurling into myself doesn't do anything to me, but knocks down all of him. And because I have 2 models with Might, I can actually choose to engage with Radagast if I want to, and start hurling into my own combats that I fear will be a big problem. Oh, that's right. Radagast doesn't have Compel. I made this mistake.
Yes, Devin. Radagast does not have Compel. He does not have Black Dart. He does not have Shroud of Shadows.
There's no Sorcerer's Blast either.
He does not have Chill Soul.
So for anyone who knows me, knows I went to a tournament once, thought Radagast had Compel, and then started using it. So
that's why Devin is a TO and not a player.
Yeah, exactly. So Radagast does not have Compel, which means that I'll have to actually kind of I'll probably have to hunt down what's his name, Tim with Boromir then in that case, if he starts sending wargs around. But regardless of that, I still think I'm fine. I'm hitting him so fast that I can probably just grab them up, like, if he sends them out too fast, and then they'll just die. So he can't send out his wargs like I can send out my eagles. But essentially, and then he is kind of limited to his lanes he's able to run here. He doesn't exactly have that many options. So that's pretty much how I play it. I mean, realistically, my list plays pretty simplistically, but the defensive play is essentially, being able to hurl into my own stuff, being able to call heroic combats that enable those hurls sooner than his, and then, of course, 2 of my eagles have heroic defense, so if I do throw them into a situation they really can't handle, not being swarmed, but like, let's say, I don't know, dealing with Bolg himself, who has +1 to wound and can start dealing a lot of damage, I can activate heroic defense in the situation where I think that would be necessary. But otherwise, Gwahir does have strike. But yeah, I mean, beyond pummeling his list to death and hurling them to the ground all over the place, I mean, I have 5 eagles, and his hurl lanes are going to be really obvious. I mean, he doesn't have a lot of ways to surround me, especially if I engage in the water. He's moving half speed, and I'm not. If I move into the trees, once again, like, he's got these very narrow paths he can take. He's going to take a lot of hurl damage. So, and he does get wound on 5, so I'll leave it off at that. Tim, what are you thinking?
I just want to clarify. So you said you had 2 eagles, Gwahir, Boromir, and Radagast?
3 eagles.
Okay.
Yeah, Gwahir, Radagast, and Boromir, yeah.
Okay. Okay, but it's the Fellowship Boromir, right?
It's Fellowship Boromir.
Okay. And I apologize. Which corner did you pick again?
It would be the top left one.
Top left. Okay, so I have bottom right. Okay, so I start there. I think, like Devin said, he's going to try to take it with the eagle and run off of his board edge. It would probably be right in that the objective would probably be very close to that little middle patch on the bottom right there.
So the objective's probably going to be about here, just kind of up and to the right of the of the terrain piece.
So it's in like a clear area.
Okay, it's a clear area.
It's like a clear area with a couple of trees around it.
Mm-hmm. Well, now I wish I had deployment. I could have. All right. So like Devin said, I don't have a great deal of options because of all the trees. The Fell Wargs, I definitely think are going to be huge because of their 10-inch movement. They don't need to see the problem. The problem is going to ultimately be is when he gets into my area, I only have Courage 2, and I have to charge his terrifying things besides Boromir. So I think my goal is going to try to be to get Bolg on Boromir as soon as possible when he gets to the area and take out probably his 4 might at that point. And the benefit of me having all 4 heroes who have strike is that even if he calls defense, well, that's fine, because if I can take Boromir out relatively soon, then it'll be one of those situations where he only has Gwahir and Radagast to call does Radagast have strike?
Radagast is not. So the Heroic defense is
Yeah.
on Guahir and Radagast. Guahir has strike, which would probably be
Yeah.
more commonly used with Guahir
Yeah.
rather than defense. And then Boromir has, of course, strike.
Yeah.
And I don't believe he has defense, but I honestly don't think it matters.
Yeah, yes,
the horn. Yeah, he does have defense, but I'll be more often using the Horn of Gondor and using strike to try to get killed.
Yes. I think ultimately what I'd probably do is, you send the Fell Wargs out, maybe send a few Berserkers out as well to try and get to Devon's objective, because I think Devon's mindset is come get the objective, and then if I need to play defense while I'm already on my way back, I already have the objective. So I think I would spread my orcs out very largely in spaces where his eagles couldn't even land until he got to the front line, and then he'd have to hurl from there, but they'd be relatively spread out so that even if he gets a hurl off, it's not going to get that many people because they'll be so dispersed that it'll be hard for him to A, land, and then B, get a decent hurl off. And then
Smart move, Tim. I didn't think you would think of
that. The objective for me is simply to not give him any space to move. And even when he hurls, there's not going to be many people to hurl into. And then it's just a time thing where I'm holding off for time until my wargs get to the objective, pick it up, and then possibly pass it off to a Berserker who has the 6+ save in case he gets into him. So, you'd have a couple people going left and a couple people going right, and then Devon can choose to disperse back if he wants to, but I think his main objective is to get to the objective, try to take it, go back, and then if he needs to kill anybody who has his objective, and that's fine because he's already that far forward and I won't be able to catch him. But my goal is simply to play very defensively and not give him just delay, let my guys get back. So then as he's running off, well, then maybe I can split it up and then I go forward as he's going back. And then it's almost creating this thing where I'm almost pushing him into probably where Emin is, because he'd probably be going around there to beat the guy who has the relic for me. And then I kind of trap him and I get a couple good heroic moves, luckily, and then heroic strikes with everybody. And with the killing power that this list has, with everybody being strength 4, everybody having at least 2 attacks besides the wargs, you really get that kind of concept where if Devon gets unlucky or something bad goes for him, he's probably going to die, even though I might fail a couple courage tests with my hunter orcs. My Berserkers are courage 6, so they're not really worried about getting in and pinning people down. And then if I get a couple hunter orcs in and then maybe like a Fimble or a Yazneg, if I get Yazneg in with a heroic strike or Fimble in, Yazneg gets the +1 because he charged. And then with the heroic strike, let's say I had 2 hunter orcs and Berserker, that eagle's almost probably dead because I'll have like 12 dice to kill him. And if I need to use might, I'll use might to kill an eagle, and then that makes things a lot more difficult. The second his heroes start to go down, or even models in general, if I took out the 2 regular eagles, you have Guahir, you have Radagast on eagle, and you have Boromir, but that's 3 people. I can easily surround 3 people, and with Boromir not having terror, all I have to do is put 1 hunter orc into him, and then maybe get a hero in later, maybe call heroic combat into Boromir, and then with a heroic strike, and then Boromir would have to make that decision if he wants to pre-call a striker, and if he does, maybe I just leave him alone, and he wasted a point of might calling a strike instead of a combat. So it's really, for me, going to be a defensive game where I spread out, leave as much time as possible, let my wargs and my few Berserkers I let out go get the objective, come back, and just take out as many people as I can.
I'll be interested if that plan pulls off. Unfortunately, we've never be able to play it.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd be definitely very scared of the fact that if you can get the objective, if you then win that heroic move off the next turn and you get, let's say you call the heroic march and heroic move at the same time, if you win that move and that eagle moves 15 inches with the thing, I think that's game, because I'm probably not going to be able to catch up to you at that point. But that's why I want to take Boromir out as soon as possible, because if you get into a position where even if you're 12 inches, well, that's fine. I have heroes on wargs, and wargs, to be fair, that are 10-inch movement, so you're not going to get that far away. If you can get that march off, that 5 inches difference between my wargs or my that 7-inch difference between that's huge, and that's probably the game right there.
Well, keep in mind, just one thing to note: I don't really have to call March. I can just pop on top of that almond hen looking thing at the bottom.
Oh, I understand. I understand.
And fly away.
But my point is, if you have to get the objective in the bottom right, it's going to take at least 2 turns to get to almond hen. So that first turn.
No, not almond hen itself. Because I only have to get back on my half. Yeah. So what I do is I grab the objective and jump on top of that rock face. And then I just fly off of that.
Yeah.
And then I'm actually very close to my half. So that's actually kind of more how I would play it, just assuming you wouldn't be on top of that ledge at all because the fight would never be there. And also it just is hard for you to get up it.
Yeah.
But I think as of this point, I mean, the only thing I would say is, obviously with the judges here, Mick and Matt are about to make a decision on who they think won. I think obviously the play is to make you think as defensively as possible, which is why I'm being so aggressive. And I think one thing, if I can mention it without it being factored into the judge's decision, is the fact that note the
look in my ears.
No. Here's what I'd say. No, Mick, I actually encourage you to listen to it. I'm just saying, just note that Tim did not say that he was going to go super aggro and send all berserkers and fell wargs after the objective. He actually just said fell wargs, which is always 6, and he was.
I said I'd send a couple. I said a couple.
I'm just throwing that out there that he's not going full aggro here. So
unless he's bluffing.
No, I mean this is what he said he was going to do. So because my big fear was he was going to send all 10 berserkers and 6 wargs out there, but that's not what he was going to do. He was going to. I
would probably keep 4 berserkers back out of the 10. So that they could charge.
I don't know, Tim. Sounds like you're changing your mind based on what I just said. and honestly, I would try to. This is where mind games do try to come into play. I would try to actually encourage it. Like I would try to say things like little subtle things like, "Ah, man, if your berserkers kill my eagles, that'd be terrible." And little subtle things like that throughout a game, and it starts to influence the actions of
I'll be honest with you. Mind games, I'm not a big fan of mind games.
Yeah, I think like the only one I can't really do that on is like top level play like Matt and whatnot. But usually you can like throw out little lines here and there, and you'd be surprised how often it'll work where the player will do exactly what you're asking.
Are you not calling me top players? Is that what you're saying, Devin? I'm not a top player.
You didn't win Nova.
That's true.
He's saying you're too considerate, Tim. This all goes back to his initial stratagem of let me see if I can change the board, get my board because it is unfavorable to me.
Yeah. I mean, nice guys finish last, right?
Yeah. For those of you who are out there listening to this, if 2 players agree to change the board, one of them has made a mistake. 9 times out of 10, it is the person who did not ask the question first. Just so you know.
So, I mean, yeah. Unfortunately, it's not that. Obviously, you can go 2 approaches with it. Like, it's so tough because a lot of people would be like, nah, let's just have a fair game about it, which is totally fine. There are some top level players. Like I can see like, Damien O'Byrne would probably possibly take some terrain off, even though like he knows it probably like, let's say the situations were like this, he might actually be okay with it because he doesn't mind a fair fight. So it just depends on how you word it, the type of attitude you want to have about it. Like, keep in mind, I wouldn't be upset. It more would be like with a smile on my face and being like, oh, this sucks. So, I mean, because, at the end of the day, we're rolling dice, so it's no big deal. Yeah. But yes, there are some mind games you try to play. But with that in mind, I guess we will go into the judges' rulings about who would win this match. What do you guys think?
I was just wondering, how many models do you have, Tim? And how many fell wargs and berserkers and warg riders?
All right. So I have 49 total models. I have 8 fell wargs and 10 berserkers.
And
no riders.
Who is on a warg and who is not?
Fimble is on warg. Yaznag's on warg with Lance. Bolg's on warg, and then Keeper of the Dungeons can't take a warg. So
you did get wargs for all your heroes. Got it.
Yes.
All right. So or do you want me to?
Well, I can start. So Tim, just to confirm, you're keeping everything back. You're not actually deploying anything forward, and you're playing defensively, right?
Well, so the things that can go fast, besides a few berserkers, are going forward. And I need a few berserkers back because if I really need to charge an eagle or one of Guahir or Neat, I really need something that'll pin to them. And with them having courage 6, I'd keep a few of them back, so then that way I could charge things.
Jackson, he only mentioned
So-
sending wargs forward earlier.
I know.
I said berserkers.
Yeah,
I said no. I'm not
distracted.
having this. I said berserkers. I'm not having this.
Yeah, I'm just not really sure what's going on here. It's like fake news all over the place.
I absolutely said I'd send berserk. I said I'd keep a few berserkers back for this exact reason.
We have a recording apparently though, so maybe the viewers will let us know what's wrong.
Okay, so this looks quite similar to a game I played a couple of years ago against David Clubley from GBHL, and he had Radagast on Eagle and some Eagles, and I had a horde of Mordor and Harad with Witch King and Suladan. So I was feeling super confident that all my heroic strikes are like really gonna decimate his Eagles, but I very quickly found out that as long as the Eagles sort of go in a ball, it's very difficult to surround them, especially in a place like this where there's just so much terrain everywhere. So yeah, I'm sort of thinking that if, let's say, Devin was to clump up into a ball and just fly forward, then obviously Tim can go around him and pick up the objective. But Devin has this like very strong sort of hitting power with all of his stuff as soon as he charges. And I don't think many Eagles are going to be dying despite the heroic strikes because of how dense the terrain is. So yeah, so before I make a judgment, I just wanted to say all these things, and maybe I'll pass on to Matt for now. Matt,
Sure.
what do you think?
So I kind of had the same thought you did, that it's actually going to be fairly tough to kill these eagles. And one interesting thing that I didn't, well, let me ask you this, Tim. I mean, as I've understood it, you're kind of keeping most of your heroes back and you're sending your fellow wargs and a couple of berserkers forward. Is that right?
Yeah, so all my heroes would be back, and then
Okay.
all my
Means I'd
fellow.
slaughter them all.
So I'm not sure that's the best tactic, in particular with Fimble, because Fimble alone of this list is the one who can just run through whatever terrain he wants to run through.
That's true.
And I think he's the guy you want to kind of lead the advance on the objective, on the other side's objective, because he can just run through all these woods with impunity.
Mm-hmm.
And I think basically as you've described it, I think the advantage here goes to Devin, because I think Devin is going to be able to kind of pick you apart with his Eagles, kind of coming in, killing a bunch of guys, coming out. His Eagles are going to be very difficult to charge by everybody but the Berserkers, and you kind of split the Berserkers at this point. I mean, even your heroes are going to have a problem charging, with the exception of Bold. Even your heroes are going to have a problem charging the Eagles. And even if Bold charges an Eagle, if he's going in on his own, he still has to call a strike because the Eagles are fight 8.
Mm-hmm.
Actually,
Fight
Eagles,
7. Guahir is fight 8.
Guahir is fight 8. So if he goes in against Guahir, he's going to have to call a strike. And he probably wants to call the strike against any of the other Eagles because he's still just going to match. So that's going to kind of burn through your might pretty quickly. And those Eagles are defense 8. So they have got 3 wounds. They can take a punch.
And I can heal them.
And you can heal, and Devin can heal them. Although Devin did say he was keeping Radagast back, so I don't think you can actually heal them because Radagast is in the backfield here. Which, by the way, I don't think is the.
Well, when I say staying back, I actually meant like very slow. Like, so basically the initial charge, and then he's like 6 inches back. He's not like all the way in the back.
Do we have this?
Boromir.
Could we have the stenographer read back the earlier testimony?
So the one hunting down things was Boromir, but no problem. I don't mind saying, not clarifying that and saying the Radagast thing back. Yeah, I wouldn't keep his magic far away from the rest of the Eagles and him not in a position where he can't pounce it in. I just was saying the initial charge would be the other Eagles. So, but yeah.
Yeah, but I think you're going to have playing a mostly defensive game. I think you're going to probably get picked apart. Eventually, the Eagles going to get in and grab that objective and be able to get it somewhere. And once kind of Devon's got it somewhere, I don't think you're ever really going to get it back. I actually wonder whether the better strategy here, if I were to put myself in Tim's shoes, would be to
all in forward.
All in forward, yeah. I think that is.
I don't think you go all forward. I think you keep Bolg and you keep all of your gun to bed berserkers back. The gun to bed berserkers surround the objective and basically create the minefield that the Eagles have to pick through, and then Bolg just kind of hangs out somewhere nearby and jumps in and tries to kill Eagles, and then everything else goes for the objective. And that gives Devon a real dilemma there about, does he commit enough force to get past Bolg and the berserkers, which he can do, but may well do at the expense of letting Fimble and everybody else get in, basically swarm his own objective and get it taken as well.
All right,
I'm not 100% sure I'd agree, because if you're keeping all those models back, like the other objectives in the scenario are still break him and kill the general. So in this case, you're not killing the general, but if he's keeping all the berserkers back and Bolg, then all Devon has to do is just kill, let's say, 25 models. There's already less of them coming at you, and then he simply wins by breaking your opponent. So if anything, I would just go all in with pretty much everything that Tim has. But seeing that he's playing defensively, that makes me think that Devon's favorite here because of this defensive approach.
I mean, okay. I think that the disadvantage of going all in, right, is the flip side of that coin. If Tim goes all in, that means you can send one Eagle to grab the objective. Everything else, and you're going to get that objective, and you're going to get it to wherever you need to get it. And then everything else can just gang up on killing Bolg, and then you have the game even if you lose your own objective. I guess that's the downside. But I agree with you. The way it has been described, I think it's advantage Devon.
Let us know in the comment section below if you agree with our Matt and Mick, if you think Devon would win that. I want to thank everybody for tuning into this week, and we look forward to seeing you next week.
Remember, I already got majority votes, so I already win